Well, hello. Welcome everybody to Coffee with Kim. We are here with Elroy. How do you say your last name, Elroy?
It could be two ways, not a chew or not that chew. So a
Okay.
T turned into a D.
Well, first of all, I got to ask this question. Where are you?
Currently I'm in Zuni, New Mexico, and I'm currently at work. So I work for an arts cooperative here. We're the only Native American art-based cooperative in the entire state of New Mexico. So I work in various mediums. Predominantly, I'm a 2D artist. That's what I originally started out and sort of created a name for myself. A lot of my work is based on a little bit more of the combination of modernism and traditional sort of iconography. A lot of it's kind of based off of when I went to university and studied art history and different types of genres. I kind of combined splatter work from Jackson Pollock, a little bit of Van Gogh's use of color theory. So I do embroidery for about 10 plus years. Also, I do a lot of traditional cooking demonstrations. I go to different places and teach how to recreate some of the old dishes, but with using more modern cookware.
So, do you have examples of your art?
Um, yes and no.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of the times, I don't really keep originals on hand. Usually I store them away so that way it protects them from fading. But I did bring my sketchbook. It's kind of examples of the process that I go through as well as the finished outcome. Paintings in particular, my mind is very detail orientated and analytical. So I got one right here. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh,
So I start off with the main figure sketch, but then on the side I put a lot of notes detailing on either color background, position, things I need to change, and also since I enter a lot of art markets, I need to remember the date. But this is just like a rough sketch. None of my sketches are really pristine or pretty. So I like to do a lot of detail work, especially with the Zuni Kachina figures that I do. I like to utilize old textiles within these paintings. In this one, you can see the detail in all of the hair. I take my time, the feather work, and then as we go down to the actual kilt that's across the shoulders, I do individual embroidery strands as well as hair. I like to focus on jewelry, hands, and just really get detail orientated. And with this one, with a lot of my paintings, I like to hide sort of imagery for different teaching purposes. A lot of times it's based on culturally like basic knowledge. So a lot of times when members in our community will purchase a painting or a print and they would just see a pretty picture. But what I would like to do a lot of times is I always tell customers that if they want to know more, just come by, ask me, because I hide a lot of meaning in these paintings, and it all originates to their actual storyline of these figures from either migration stories, cultural foundation stories. It all depends on what type of painting I do. And I don't just do Kachina work, I also do non-Kachina work. So it just varies, and depending on what I'm feeling that day, I'll jump from one medium to another, and it kind of can get confusing, but it's a nice little break from paperwork.
I definitely saw in the pieces that were shared with me, there was one painting with butterflies, and then there was another painting, and it definitely had the kachinas, but then behind it, there was imagery that was in the sky. And so like that
Yeah.
imagery that
So
was
a lot of
in the sky, what was that?
So a lot of the imagery in the background is all related to moisture. And a lot of times what I hide behind those in the background images are silhouettes of sort of sacred pictography. A lot of them combine stars, the sun, and the moon. And a lot of it goes down to our migration for us as Zunis in particular, we kind of don't have a holy trinity. We have a holy quadruplet. So we have the Father Sun, Mother Earth, Father Sky, and Grandmother Moon. And a lot of times I like to incorporate that because a lot of times people tend to forget about the sky and how he's associated with our creation story. And a lot of the times in my paintings, it's all geared back to our foundation and creation stories because as we go on, I've noticed there's variations in stories as they're being told, since predominantly it's an oral tradition of passing down this knowledge. But as it goes on, sometimes people forget. So what I'm trying to do is keep these as more of cultural records to help the younger generation, because even nowadays with the whole modernization and westernization, but also colonialization, it's a lot harder to get our youth to participate in our culture, whether that be social dances, the Kiva societies. It's just sort of a give and take. We get modern day amenities, but then we also lose a bit of what and who we were to begin with.
So when you talk about the Zuni Pueblo, can you tell the audience exactly where that Pueblo is?
So it's located about 30 minutes or 30 miles south of Gallup. It's almost near the Arizona border, so we're the largest Pueblo-based communities. Within New Mexico, there are 20, Arizona and New Mexico, I always forget about Arizona, but there are 20 federally recognized Pueblo communities. Ancestrally, there were a lot more, but due to the reservation system, a lot of times the Pueblo communities adopted other Pueblos that were smaller, and a lot of times through the intermingling of bloodlines, we kind of forgot there was more than just these 20 Pueblos. But for Zuni in particular, we were the first contact point with the Spanish. So we were the first ones to actually encounter any sort of outside individuals. And originally, Zuni was similar to Hopi, where we had 6 individualized villages, but due to the constant battling with the Spanish, Navajo, and Apache, once they kind of got a little bit crazy, we all organized and moved to what's known as modern day Zuni, the village that we are in now. So all of the villages that were once inhabited have become ruins, but they still hold cultural significance within a lot of our religious doings and things like that. But we were the first ones to encounter the Spanish, as well as where the story of the 7 cities of gold came from was because of a Franciscan monk who saw the village during sunset. And with a lot of Pueblo communities, we use adobe for our plastering, and it contains sometimes straw, grass, and things like that. So when the sun hits it at that peak moment of what's called the golden hour, it looked like our village was made out of gold. And that's where the rumor spread. But then also it was because he sent one of his subordinates, Esteban. He was sent ahead as a scout, but then he got in trouble, and he was executed here in Zuni. And then that's when the Franciscan monk went back down south, and he brought the Spanish as a way to deal with us.
Wow. So that's even like what you're talking about, oral history, I think that it's very intriguing to me, because coming from a tribe where they used oral history and then they put it in their art in order to keep the stories alive. I'm assuming you're doing the same thing.
Yes.
Oh, that's very cool. So is that something that you learned from your parents, or is this like an initiative that you took on?
Both. A lot of the time, for myself in particular, I grew up in a very strict household, and a lot of my grandparents, aunts, and uncles, they were all religious figures within our community. So we kind of grew up very strict with a certain sort of protocol of taboos, restrictions, and also how we act with individuals. So when we were growing up, we would learn our history from the creation story, foundation stories, and also during winter time, that's when our grandfather and other relatives that knew the stories that were available to be told during those winter months, we would learn about stories from the coyote, the two lovers, and just all of these different tales, sort of. Although they're tales, they kind of teach morality in a sense of how we should view people from a Zuni perspective. And that's how I always grew up from a very early age. And for myself, it was a little bit harder since I grew up. I was born with a malformed left hand, so I had a lot more sort of challenges to overcome as far as functioning normally. But I managed to utilize things to my advantage and was always asking questions. That's one thing that I've noticed from the younger generation, even the generation of my parents, is that nobody really asked questions. It was more so you do as you're told and you do as you're taught. But when you start asking questions, you start to find out certain little things don't seem to align and trying to figure out where these differences come from. And that all seems to stem from when we were six villages. Because you notice nowadays in our pueblo that certain families and certain individuals within our community have a certain way of speaking. Their dialect may be a little bit different. Certain words may mean a different thing. Taboos might be different based on clan or based on where they originated. And that's all based on those six individualized villages, just like how it is in Hopi, where each village has their own set of rules. When we combined ourselves all into one, we kind of forget where the roots of those people came from. So as we go along and along and along, when we're trying to document our oral history, that's when people start to butt heads because it's kind of like, well, this is what they told me and this is how it should be kind of situation. But nobody really asks, well, why is it this way? How come it's this way? If we start asking more questions, then it sort of creates more of an understanding, not only with the people that are discussing, but with the younger generation. Because as we start building curriculum based in Zuni language, it gets more confusing because what we're teaching our younger generation, depending on who it's coming from, may or may not be like from a specific standpoint of where or how they grew up. So
I
it kind
love
of gets
that.
crazy.
Well, so I come from a tribe. I'm enrolled with a tribe where there's 12 different bands.
Hmm.
So as you were talking, I could see us like having pillow fights about, what's appropriate and where's the root and, who's right and who's wrong. And I think that, that's been the challenge for us as Native people is that yes, we have reservations, but some of these have numerous bands in them that had different roots of who they were as a people group. So I love that. Why textiles? What got you into textiles?
Well, for textiles in general, I learned from my mother. Um, a little bit of history on textiles is that originally in Pueblo communities, textiles were a male gender-based occupation. So from weaving belts to mantas to blankets and things like that, it was all done by the men. The reasoning for that is the loom is sort of, when you're in the process of weaving, it acts as a male and female. So you, as the weaver, are using the loom, which represents the female. So when you open the shed back and forth, it's creating a diamond patterning. And as you're using your string to create the actual garment, you're kind of creating an act of procreation that is not available for those male individuals because it's more of a female trait of being able to procreate and have children. It's our way of giving birth to creations by weaving these garments and creating new life. It's our way of symbolically being closer to where we came from and being close to nature, Mother Earth, that sort of aspect of. It's more of a humbling aspect because when you learn embroidery, there's a lot of restrictions as far as color usage, patterning, how design should be placed. And a lot of the time, it's very rigorous work. You'll never meet a rich weaver. that's one thing that's non-existent. You'll meet a weaver who's able to get by, but none of them will be rich. It's more of a craft of love and of devotion when you start to weave, embroider, and do textile arts. But one thing that I want to do, and as far as one of my teachers and mentors, who was Louis Garcia, he is one of the Piro tribe down in near Las Cruces area. He kind of taught me how to do the belt weaving portion and a little bit more background on textile history. So from there, we're always trying to educate our Pueblo community because at one time or another, we all had different styles as far as color patterning, designs, but as we went along, it was all basically due to one specific problem, and that was the Spanish asking for tribute. So when the Spanish were constantly asking for tribute, since we didn't have gold and things valuable in their eyes, they took our textiles as payment. So a lot of the time, the weavers were kind of bullied and pushed around, and some communities completely stopped weaving because they didn't want to have those kind of interactions. So at one time or another, Hopi was the main sort of production line of Pueblo textiles, from men's kilts, mantas, and belts. Some of the Pueblo communities along the Rio Grande still kept the belt weaving, some small blanket weaving. Hopi, Zuni, Laguna, Acoma, we kind of kept up our embroidery weaving. Since we're kind of isolated from the main strip along the Rio Grande, we were able to hold on to a lot more. But as time went on, since Hopi was the main manufacturer and distributor of cotton and all of the textiles, nowadays when you look at Pueblo communities, we sort of have the same dress code. There's a women's manta, a belt, and then a lot of the times when you visit Pueblo communities, they forgot how, or a specific way that they tied their mantas, their belts, what certain meanings were to these type of garments. So a lot of why I go into textiles is based on bringing back this textile knowledge to our community, because a lot of the times there's sacredness in these garments that sort of isn't appreciated as much anymore because of our society being able to go to Walmart and purchase so many shirts and just like that. But when you actually do textiles by hand, it takes months to a year to finish one garment. For me now, it used to take me 2 months to embroider a woman's white cape, and that was just it, starting from sunrise to sunset. And when I get embroidering, I kind of go into this zone where I don't eat, I don't drink, and it's only until they start yelling at me like, come to dinner or go drink something, you look all somehow, and then I have to stop and I'll be okay, I'll go do that.
Shower.
Yeah. It was like, but I wanted to finish this. I'm really like getting to a point where I'm almost there. And it's just that love for textiles that pushes you to finish a project. And when you see it completed, it's something that's undescribable. It's just that seeing a bit of yourself, but a bit of sort of all the emotions that go through it. Because with textiles, like any type of art, like when we teach, is you have to go into it with open mind, open heart. You can't be sort of sad, mad, because these textiles will fight you tooth and nail. If you're mad, the yarns will get tangled, the string will break, or they'll smack you in the face. That's happened to me a couple of times when embroidering. That I have my embroidery hoop and I'll be embroidering, then all of a sudden I pull too hard and it just smacks me right in the face. Or if I'm like really going at it and I kind of zone out, I tend to cut myself with a needle. So a lot of the times when I'm embroidering, I get scars on my face, and it's just something that I you learn to deal with.
On something right now that's a textile?
Not at the moment. I was gonna bring it, but I forgot about it as soon as the.
Here's what I want to do. So we're definitely featuring you, Elroy, because you're a 2D artist. And I think,
Mhm.
is that what you're juried in as a 2D artist?
Yeah,
Swaya? So how long have you been a Swaya Indian market artist?
2 years.
Okay, that's cool. So in January, so we're doing themes every month here
Mhm.
at Playa, and we're featuring artists. And so we're going to be doing a whole programming on textiles. And I know that Amber Dawn will be capturing the fashion part of it, but I would love to be able to circle back around to you to talk about the traditional aspects of this, because I think that even in talking with Amber Dawn and some of the fashion designers, I mean, they're all talking about taking a part of who they are as Indigenous and bringing that into their creations. And so would love to circle back around with you regarding your textiles.
Yeah, that'd be more than welcome. Currently, I'm working on a repair job of an old maiden's cape I did a couple years back, so that one should be ready by then
Okay,
for
that's
viewing.
good. Well, I'm excited about it. And then the other question I have for you is, do you have a website?
Yes, so I do have a website with my cousin. So it's www.natachuink, that's NATACHUINK.com.
Sounds good. Well, nice to meet you, Elroy.
Yeah,
All right. Bye-bye.
bye.